All right, kids. Welcome to episode numero uno of Big Old Basics. Thought it'd be cool to do a series of videos on some really basic stuff when it comes to tools, DIY, maker stuff, whatever you want to call it. And what more basic place to start than tape measures and measurement. But first, I want to point out this hat. I don't wear hats. But this came in a pack of lights. I don't mean Marlboro lights or Bud lights. This came in a pack of recessed lighting. So I felt like I had to wear it. I don't like hats, but it's like, who does that? It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So I felt compelled to wear it. Anyway, tape measures. Tape measures come in all kinds of different sizes, shapes, and configurations. From this little tiny keychain variety, this kind of medium size, I don't know, 10 footer, 12 footer. This is more typical of what you're going to see in the hardware store today. And if you notice, it automatically retracts, which is one of the two basic configurations that I've seen in the hardware stores around here. The other is this one that doesn't retract unless you push this button. To be honest with you, I have become very comfortable with these that don't auto retract. This one though has started to split, so I had to replace it. So when it comes to these, for the most part, there's not a lot of things to consider other than the size. These are 25 foot, which is usually going to cover most of the work that I'm going to do, and probably that you're going to do. There are larger ones, but you know, when it comes to these handheld felt clipping tape measures, 25 feet is about the standard until you get into the bigger stuff, but that's not what we're talking about today. So one thing to consider beyond these retracting mechanisms and the length that you're trying to measure are the graduations on these. So I'm going to zoom in here and I'll show you what I'm talking about, graduations. So a graduation has absolutely nothing to do with high school when it comes to a tape measure. So what I'm talking about here are the markings. So obviously you have the inch marks, which are going to be the most important. And then beyond that, you're going to have halves, quarters, eighths, and the 16ths right here, which aren't marked on this one. Not all tape measures are going to have those marked out either. They expect you to do the math yourself. So in this Lufkin, you got your halves, you got your quarters, you got your eighths, and your 16ths. You may find some somewhere that are measured down to 30 seconds, but for the most part, 16th is about as fine as you're going to get on the graduation. Another thing that you may want to note on here is they do have the foot marks delineated here. And then on most tape measures, you're going to see something like this, these red letters on the 16 there. And then there's a box on this one. So that's going to happen at intervals of 16 inches. Notice right there on 32. The reason for that is it's very common to use these to measure joists, studs, and other things that are typically going to be 16 inches on center. Another thing to be aware of is this end, generally you want that to move. That doesn't mean it's broken, doesn't mean it's loose, because there are two different ways that you're generally going to measure with this. One of them, and probably the most common, is that you're going to hook it and pull, okay? The other option is that you're going to push against something and measure. So that movement here allows the tape to be used in both orientations, but compensate for the thickness of the hook on the end here. So these are not precision tools. You are not going to use these as a machinist or an engineer who needs to draw super precise or make super precise measurements for cuts. But they're going to do everything you need them to do if you remember one important thing. They are not designed for precision. They are not designed to any specific standard. And every tape measure, to some degree, is going to have a discrepancy in measurement. I'm going to try to demonstrate that here by butting these up against that. Now, these are probably very close, but you are going to see discrepancies. And if you look right here at the 3-inch mark compared to the 3-inch mark here, they're pretty close. But if we were really to zoom in here, you're going to see a difference. Might just be 1/16 or a 32nd of an inch, but there is a difference. And it's probably going to be more pronounced on some cheaper versions of these. So the important thing to remember is when you are measuring and cutting, use the same tape measure. Don't go measure your space with this one and then use this one to measure your materials for the cut. They will be off. So, tape measures, about as basic as it gets. If you don't have one, you're not doing anything. Go buy one if you're going to do some DIY stuff or just cut or whatever. Doesn't matter what brand, who cares? I've used a million different ones. I don't have a preference. Like I said, other than I do kind of like this mechanism. Other people are going to hate it. But if you're framing, doing a lot of carpentry, remodeling stuff, get something, roughly 25 feet because you're going to be measuring some longer distances and it gets very difficult to be accurate using, say, a 12-foot tape measure when you're measuring across a hallway that might be 22 feet long. Another thing to consider are the hooks on here. Like we said, there's different orientations you're going to use this in. But regardless, use the same tape measure every time you measure for the inside of one project. If you decide, okay, I'm going to buy a new tape measure, that's fine. But just use that one for all your measurements and for all your cuts, because that's the only way you're going to be consistent with your measurements. That's it. Big old basics numero uno, kids. I know that one's super basic, and there's probably not a lot of people watching this that really give a crap. But there are some people out there who really just don't know what a tape measure is and how to use it. Remember, kids, just because you're an idiot doesn't mean you have to do anything halfway.